co-host.
Santi Hernandez.
And on today's show, we have a very special guest. We have Gueverly Mendez, who just recently graduated from law school. And she's here today to talk to us about her journey with going into law school and all that. And just a little bit of background. Actually went to the same middle school that Gueverly went to. We both went to Davidson. And it's just interesting. It's all kind of like a full circle moment, I think, because like we didn't really talk in middle school, but like having you back on this show and then being able to kind of hear about your background is just awesome. So I'm really excited to talk about today's show, and thank you for being with us, Gueverly. Just introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Gueverly. Let's see. I graduated law school this past May, and I was studying for the bar exam, and I sat for it in July. And I'm waiting for my results, but yeah, I did the thing.
Congratulations. Well, I know that in itself is a big process. So I coming from a background where I have no clue about law school or lawyer or being a lawyer, like what that entails. Mm-hmm. I have no clue. So I'm really, really looking forward to talking about it. Did you want to add anything, Santi?
Well, first, congrats on graduating and taking the bar.
Thank you.
I'm with Javier. I have no idea about what it takes to, be in law school and, becoming a lawyer. So I'm really excited to learn more about it, and also for our audience to learn more. And as you mentioned before, when you were going through your journey, you wanted to hear more conversations about going through law school and that whole process. So I'm excited to learn and for our audience to learn as well.
Awesome. Yeah, well, right before we kind of get into it, I did want to ask you guys, so the summer's closing up now. Pretty quickly too. I felt like July went by really fast.
Sad.
Yeah, it is sad. But I wanted to ask, like, what was your guys' highlight of this summer?
Ooh. Well, I was studying for the bar exam, which meant being locked away for 10 weeks, studying nonstop. But I think my highlight was being done, submitting it and just being hands off, like. It's done.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's completely reasonable. How about you, Santi?
I didn't even have time to enjoy summer. Like I don't even have a highlight at the top of my head right now, because I worked through this whole summertime, and I'm definitely overdue on a good time off and vacation. So I just can't believe summer's over. Well, kind of over, almost over.
Almost over. Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I think this summer I got to really like hone in on my videography skills and really get all that stuff situated, as well as just connect with a lot of new people this month. I mean, so throughout the month of July, I just got to reconnect with so many people that I hadn't talked to, and so Gueverly being one of them. And it's just like, I think it's interesting because I don't know, you never know where people end up, right? Mm-hmm. Especially after high school, after middle school, like. I'm just glad that I've been able to keep up with people and kind of just know where they're at, and it's good,
I was going to mention that when you get to your peers in school, whether in middle school or high school, you are in a time now where a lot of them have graduated or they're doing different things, and you kind of see where their life is going. I think it's so interesting and crazy how life is, because again, you guys are in very different industries, but you guys can reconnect. And learn from what you guys are doing. So I think that's really, really cool about life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like most of my peers are in different points of their lives. And that's the beauty in it. It's like the beauty of growing up and seeing where people are. So, yeah.
And Marin's a really small place. So it's like everyone kind of reconnects one way or another. Mm-hmm. Or you see some people in passing, what I mean? So, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing, guys. So going right into it. So, Gueverly, my first question is for you is when you were growing up, did you always know you wanted to be a lawyer, or how did that happen?
So, I mean, I didn't think law school was going to be an option up until quite literally like end of high school, but I've always had the passion to do it, simply because, I mean, I immigrated here with my family, and sadly during the 2008 like recession and the ICE raids that were happening at the time.
Right, I remember that.
That was the first time I learned that I was undocumented, just having that fear of the ICE raids. And then my dad, unfortunately, did, get detained, and we had to fight that entire case. And that was the first time, I think I was 10 years old, where I even stepped foot in a law firm. Mm-hmm. And it was out of fear because they had said that a name appear on his case that could possibly like also be deported. And at that point, we thought it was one of us. And I remember sitting there, I was 10 years old. I couldn't really do much and I didn't understand it. And that's what frustrated me as a kid, because the feeling of not being able to help, like the helplessness of just sitting there listening and just not knowing, that's what kind of planted the seed, I think. And then slowly but surely, like once my mom and I started to, seek some type of permanent residence here in the United States, we had to go through a lot of legal documents. Right. And about that time I was 13, and I was translating legal documents, a lot of paperwork that had to do with legal processes in
very complicated things for a 13-year-old to comprehend.
Exactly. Yeah. So I felt like that was kind of started the journey. And then I committed to it once I did mock trial and in high school. Yeah. So you kind of get to play the part of either a witness on the stand or an attorney. And I happened to be an attorney my last year. Yeah. And I liked it. And I liked learning from the coach that we had who was a practicing attorney. And that slowly started my interest in the law. And then throughout college, I started to do internships with like DA's offices and immigration firms. And that just slowly started progressing. And then I did it. And I was like, I feel like I have this passion in me. And ultimately, my goal with being an attorney is to get my dad some permanent residence. And going back to that little 10-year-old and telling her, you are not helpless anymore. You have done it and you know the knowledge now. So you went through that so that you can be here now as an adult and not feel that way, and now also be a source of knowledge for your community. Because at the end of the day, there's not many of us in the field. And like the legal field isn't known. So unless you're in it, it's almost like a puzzle piece that you will never figure out. So that's kind of what started my journey and how I ended up here.
Wow. I'll start. I mean, that was great. I mean, that's a lot to unpack, but that's awesome. I mean, I think it's beautiful that you're going into this and you got so inspired at such a young age because you saw it firsthand. Yeah. And I remember those ICE raids because my brother was also part of those ICE raids, and I remember also going to one of those law firms. I think it was in Canal or something. I think it might have been the same lawyer. It was a female lawyer.
It was a female lawyer, but my parents were targeted through ads on the radio, so it was a private attorney who ended up not providing in the way that now looking back at it, like being able to look over those legal documents that happened during that time, I can now look at it and see that she wasn't fighting the case in the way it should have been fought. Yeah. And I would have only known that now because I have the knowledge to look at those documents and see exactly what she did.
So there's a lot of like predatory practices, like from other lawyers, just kind of scamming in a way.
Scamming and over promising. Yeah. And I think we are such a vulnerable population because our dream is to just have permanent residence here. Yeah. Our dream is to be American citizens. So when you have a business model based on getting clients and getting money and making sure they're, paying the checks, you're going to delay it a little longer. Not saying everyone does it, and I'm not saying that she did this, but there is a business aspect to it. And I think we fall targeted ads of overpromising and not being able to deliver.
Right. You want to add something?
Yeah, I think you and I kind of have a similar background. I was also undocumented for quite some time, and I can definitely resonate the useless part. My mom to this day, she does not have permanent residency here, and it can definitely, it gets me emotional in a way sometimes because, like you mentioned, it is definitely something that, as a daughter, you're like, oh my God, I can do all of these things, but my mom can't do it or my dad can't do it. So it can be definitely a struggle. And I also agree with you that for a really long time in my family, we've had to go lawyer after lawyer after lawyer after lawyer because everyone had a different perspective. And for us, it's actually funny story. We're actually, as a family, we have finally decided to risk it all and oh my god, I'm getting emotional. Reopen the case of my mom, because there's a whole like separation part that can happen with families. So I'm just really inspired, and like props to you, because taking all of that feeling as a daughter and turning into like, hey, I'm gonna go to law school and I'm gonna do this. It gets me like so emotionally because it's really hard. That aspect of it is really, really hard.
Yeah.
Because you're fueled by it, you know? Like you're fueled by those emotions that you feel.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they always say, like, in law school, because it is such a hard journey, remember your why, why you came to law school. So what drives me to this day is my dad and what happened when I was 10 years old. So I put myself back in those shoes as a 10-year-old, telling myself, this is why you're doing it. So it really does. It kept me going in the darkest of times, to be fair. Like, yeah.
And it's interesting to me too. So I'm not undocumented. I was born here, but my brother immigrated with my mom here, and he was undocumented. So I got to also see that firsthand, like experience of what my brother was going through when he went to middle school, when he went to high school, and just how tough the police were also on Latinos at that time. Like especially on undocumented people. Like if you got arrested, that meant you were going back then. At least that's what happened, because my brother had some issues with the police, and I just remember the night, like when he got arrested, and then they deported him like right after that, and it like as a family it destroyed us. We were like, oh my goodness. Like, and now I'm glad now that I've learned. I think I learned this from a past show. I forget what show, but apparently that's not a thing anymore, where like if you get if you get the cops and they get you can't get deported if you're undocumented.
I think it's in California.
There's sanctuary states and sanctuary cities, which I think Marin is very good at. There's also, I'm forgetting the names, but there are specific attorneys where now there's a law that you have to explain the repercussions of pleading guilty to a certain crime, and those repercussions on your legal status. Because before, people would be like, oh, take this plea deal, it won't affect it. But the plea deal is technically a felony, and that is a crime that would then get you deported. So there has a lot been added the past couple years. I think in 2008, that was the first time we pretty much saw those massive ICE raids where
I remember that.
I remember that. I was in elementary school.
It's funny how you brought that back because I think we've kind of all experienced that. I was 7 years old during that time.
Well, I remember in my apartment complex they were literally knocking at the door.
Literally Univision had like full videos of people just getting taken from their home, and they were taking whoever it was.
I'm curious to know, and maybe I should hold this question, but we can kind of go on. You mentioned mock trials that so you have your why, which is crucial, especially in when you go to college. If you have your why very solid, it can be that drive that pushes you during those long nights of studying, maybe all-nighters that a lot of students have. I want to know a little bit more about your participation in mock trial. Having that, did it really, really spark that fire even more? Or what was your experience?
I think, yes. To answer your question, yes. Yeah. And it was because that was the first time I saw an attorney that because up until that point, I didn't trust attorneys.
Right.
I did not trust a single attorney. No. But when I started to do mock trial, he did a very good job of not only giving us the tools, but also giving us the learning lessons of what going through to become an attorney is like. And he shared his own experiences. He's a local Marin man. I'm obviously not going to say his name for privacy reasons, but he really did spark the trust in the field, and also motivated me to see myself in that position, because becoming a fake attorney in mock trial, it was based off of like how you were performing as an individual in the club. And he gave me the tools to stand up in a courtroom. There was a judge who's a judge in the Marin court, and it gave me how do I say it? it gave me the feeling that I could do it.
Can I ask, what was the feeling of why you couldn't do it? Why didn't you see yourself in that position?
Well, it's because there wasn't many that looked like me.
Yeah.
I have never, at least at that point, I had never seen a Latina woman address themselves as an attorney, and especially an undocumented at the time.
Right.
It wasn't a matter of like, can I? Is it even a door
Possibility,
for me?
yeah.
Is it even a possibility? And that was what I think mock trial fueled in me. It was like, no, it's a possibility. Here are the steps, and here's the person that is going to help guide you.
Right.
And I am very, very lucky to have such amazing mentors along the way that started to give me those paths to become, go to law school and hopefully become an attorney. But up until that point, I didn't have anyone who really told me like, oh, this is what you have to do this, to do that. Like I was winging it. I really didn't know what to do.
I was going to ask, because I don't know the statistics on this, but how many like female undocumented lawyers are there? Or well, like who come from an undocumented background?
So
do you know that?
I know, well, the last time I checked, I think was 2 years ago, but there is 5% of the entire attorneys are Latinos. 2% of those are Latina women.
Wow.
And undocumented,
Much lower.
it's much lower because there is a possibility that the bar, like in Florida, they passed a law where you do have to be a citizen in order to even swear into the bar, because they are able to put their own requirements to be to admit into the bar. So in Florida, it was with the new law that they passed a couple years ago. They have now stated that in order to be admitted into the bar, you have to be a citizen, if I'm not mistaken, because I haven't looked at the law yet.
Right. But that was in talks. And speaking of mock trial, so I remember when I was in high school, I was like, I might want to try out mock trial. I never did. But I was like, I always thought it was cool because I had a couple friends that were in it. And one thing that I always ask is like, okay, so how does it work? As in like, what are the cases? Like, how did that kind of work? Yeah, like what... Like,
yeah, so it basically is a countywide competition.
Right.
You get a big booklet like this, and that has your witnesses, that has your statements. It's basically like a case file.
But it's like a fake.
It's a fake case file. It's meant to stimulate like the environment of being an attorney. So in the mock trial team, what we would do is we would split off between prosecution and defense, because you would always have to argue both sides and have two different teams for each.
Right.
And then you also had your witnesses who are in a sense acting as the witness, so you have to like really dive into the declaration and feel what they're feeling and be that person on the stand. And then also you get to learn about like evidence rules, which is if you remember the Johnny Depp, where you hear hearsay, like that's a evidentiary rule that you have to learn. So we went through the processes of learning that alongside the attorneys. So it was pretty much just being fake attorneys with a real case, and then you got to go up against like every single high school in the county.
And that's actually really cool. And then what were the cases like? Like,
so
what did you guys talk about?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, because I only did it my junior year. My junior year, it was a criminal case. I ended up being the witness, and it was a case about swinging a bat and basically, if I remember, I think, it was some type of assault and battery.
With a bat.
With a bat. And my senior year, it was human trafficking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was a human trafficking.
They're
criminal
pretty real type of cases.
They're real cases. Yeah. They're honestly very intense.
Yeah.
And in the best way possible. Like you get when I was a witness, I ended up taking the creative liberty of like really being my character. So I cried on the stand. The fact that I can cry on command is kind of scary, but I can.
But you were into it.
Yeah, I was really into it. It definitely was the first time where I was like, oh, I actually like this, and I would rather be there than like play soccer. And then that's when I really knew.
Do you recommend doing participating in mock trials, even if you don't like it, just to get that?
Like if you don't want to become a lawyer or something?
I guess my question is, when you went to mock trials, did you have the intention of like, oh, let's see if I like it, or or it was kind of like, I'm just doing it, and then you realized you really enjoyed it?
It definitely was like, let me try it out. Let me see what it's like. And then also the people that you're with, I would just join it for the community itself. You do get to travel to different places to like do the mock trials, and you do have like a full day in the Marin County Superior Court where you're just hanging out in the courtroom, hanging out.
I remember seeing all the pictures of all my friends there.
And you get to dress up. Like it's a very much an experience. So I would say do it even if you have like an inkling of like wanting to know what it's like, because even if you don't want to be an attorney, you get a lot of knowledge just by being on the team.
Yeah. I think if I hadn't chosen to, because I also went through that path and like halfway through high school where I was like, okay, I'm kind of like bored of sports. I like want to try something else. In my junior year, it was either pretty much mock trial or theater. I went into theater, and I'm glad. I mean, it's still a good experience because I think what I would have learned in both was public speaking and like presenting yourself right in front of people and stuff like that. You can't be shy in those types of settings. So I'm really glad that I got to do that, and that's awesome. So actually, speaking about school, so as I mentioned earlier in the show, I did go to Davidson with Gueverly, but you know, after middle school, like everyone kind of goes their separate ways. So I remember you went to a private school. How was that like going from like transitioning from a public school that was Davidson at the time was intense, but yes. Yeah, how was it going to a private school?
It was a risk, I will say. I had a mentor who said you should go to private school because I wasn't being challenged at the time.
Yeah.
I've always been in an advanced like learning method. I was always in like the advanced
like honors classes.
Yeah,
like,
I was very academically focused. I don't know where it stemmed from, but I was always like my reading level was above my grading level, my math level, so on and so forth.
Right.
So I had a mentor who said, I think you should look into private schools so you can be challenged. And that's what kind of started the path to going into the private school. But I remember meeting with like one of the college prep like programs that we have in Marin, and I met with one of the directors. The director pretty much said, if you go to this private school, you are not going to go to college. And that to me was a sting.
That's kind of an intense thing to say. Though.
Yeah, and she was very committed to it. And that's when I had to sit with myself and ask myself, do I actually want to take the risk of going to this private school? Or do I listen and go the path that she thinks is best for me? Because it ultimately was the reason why I was denied from the program and didn't get the extra help that I wish I would have had going into college. But instead, I decided to just do it. And I went to this private school. It was challenging, to say the least. I was advanced at the time. But when I got to the private school, I realized that a lot of these students were way more advanced than I was. They had a lot more...
Because they came from private middle schools.
Yeah, they came from private schools, and not saying public schools don't have the funds, but they do operate at a different level, and they do focus on different aspects of learning. And they do have, what I didn't have was their parents to explain things that you maybe weren't getting in school. Because I couldn't go with my mom and be like, can you help me with my homework? Because my mom only had a middle school, not even an elementary degree. She didn't really know what I was going through. So not being able to have that I had to work 10 times harder to be in the same position and learn the same way as my peers.
And I think that's what a lot of Latino kids feel, especially first gens.
Yes.
Right? Coming into this country. Because, yeah, I mean, I remember that same exact feeling of like, my mom would try to help me out, but then she's like, oh, this is way past my and it was like really basic stuff, you know, at the time, but it's like, I don't blame them because at least my mom, she came here at a young age. And then, you know, when you kind of come here, also the education systems are just different.
Yeah.
In like Central America, South America, all that, like everywhere, it's different. So it's like, yeah. And then again, it kind of going back to how you translated all these legal documents for your parents and everything. I did the same thing for like the medical stuff too. Oh my God, dude. I remember like walking into those clinics and having to like translate all the documents. Because during that time when we were growing up, there was like barely any Spanish speakers at these kind of places. Or if there was, it was very limited amount.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the time that we were growing up, we didn't have the programs that we have now where we have individuals who speak Spanish and can help explain it to parents. Like, we are those individuals now, giving them those tools to understand what's happening.
And there's more resources now, luckily. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so kind of going more into the private school stuff. So what was so going into that private school, now that you were there, you were kind of talking about like how you saw differences in the students, the way the students behaved and stuff. How diverse was your private school? I guess I'll start there.
I think we could have done better at being diverse. There's definitely not that many. It was a primarily white institution.
Yeah.
We had our community in itself, but our community was so small that we could make a club out of it.
Wow.
That's how small it was.
Wow.
And some of the people who we did identify as like POCs,
Yeah.
we also had different had different ways of growing up. So there's a comfort in having people who look like you, have been through it, and understand your path that I didn't have at this private school. It felt like I didn't belong, truthfully. My background was something that they could not fathom. The fact that I was undocumented to them was that was probably their first time ever encountering
a student like that. Yeah.
But it was being in a primarily white institution. I think there's a lot of learning lessons that you learn in terms of like code switching, cultural differences, communicating back and forth. Like, I think that was something that I didn't learn prior. So going into that private school, I was forced into learning how to code switch, and also learning how to live it during at a time, like high school is a very pivotal point where you're trying to figure out yourself, fit in with people, and having that on top of being surrounded by individuals who were very privileged, or had, resources that I didn't have, having to try to fit in with them takes a toll on your mental health, because you realize you can't compete, because there's no way you're going to get to that level. And at the time, my parents were still struggling. I got a scholarship to go into that private school. I wasn't paying my way, and there was different things that you would want as a kid at that time, in that moment, that I wasn't able to have. So it was a lot. It's a lot of different cultures put into one, and I was just trying to figure out a way to just fit in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to add, Santi?
Yeah, I think that's a very common story with immigrants and people who are not white technically. It's complicated because we talked about this, how you're kind of like in an identity crisis, because
yes.
You are put into a different situation, different environment, where you're looked as like the outsider. And then when you go home, it can also look like it can really mess with your mind. So I can definitely say, and despite all of that, you going to law school, again, it's a testimony of like, it doesn't really matter your background if you really work for it. It's not, I think we walk through a much complicated path, but it's possible. I'm curious to know if you being in a private high school, did that push you a little bit forward with internships, with your going to law school? Did that help a little bit, or was that just kind of like, no, not really?
Well, I think it definitely did. And that was the first time I learned the term, it doesn't matter what you do, is who you know. And networking is a lot of the culture that I'm in. It matters who you know, it matters who you connect with, because it does, in a sense, help you out in the long term of getting those interviews, sitting down with those people at that table. And I think being at the private school that I was at, they do have a very strong community that I can turn to when I want to look into a field.
You have that leverage.
Yes, that leverage. And also the name. The name carries a lot.
Yeah.
You hear that name and you automatically think of
Prestigious.
Yeah. Private.
Yeah.
well-behaved kids, like all around.
I think all the private schools here in Marin are pretty like notable. Right? Yeah. You're like, oh, you go there. Wow.
Yeah. And they're known throughout the Bay Area too. So the name does carry a lot of weight. And it does make people look at you differently.
When you mention that.
Yes, because it adds some type of privilege to what you're speaking. At least in law school, private school, like I noticed this shift of like, as if I say I went to these things or I do even saying I went to law school, people automatically treat me differently based off of just looking at me.
Right.
And seeing a Latina woman. And that those names carry so much weight. And it doesn't matter what you do, is who you know. And I'm very grateful for the connections that I've made, and they have helped me, and they got me to where I'm at. I mean, the two institutions that I went to after that private school, like they are all interconnected and they all know of each other because they are like parent institutions to each other.
Right.
And that's how I even found out about my undergrad, where I like ended up going, was because there was a connection there. And they kind of pushed that towards me, and then it ended up being the best decision that I could have done.
Do you think if you didn't go to that private school, would it have been a lot harder to, get these internships or go to college and stuff like that?
I think it would have been harder to find them.
I see.
Yeah, I think it was going to be hard for me to get into the position that I was without them giving me the opportunities.
Yeah.
Like we talk about opening doors, like they opened the doors before I even knew I had the doors. And if I hadn't gone there, I think I could have found a couple doors, but not all of them.
All the doors, not the doors that were presented to you there.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And I'm not saying like, I feel like anyone, if you seek it out, you'll find it. But I think it came easier. And also, I will say they prepared me so well for college, because college was one of those times where I was alone and I didn't know what registering for classes were, filing for FAFSA, all of that.
All that stuff.
I did that for my private school. So I already was in that routine when I was going to college. So college was a lot easier for me.
I was going to mention too, before, we take our break, that for those who are first gen, or immigrants, when you're going to college and school, regardless if you go to a private or a public school, now there's a lot of programs that are opening up for you to know all of these. So yes, you went to a private school. It's awesome that you got that opportunity, but that does not mean that anyone else who wants to go to law school, that they can't do it. I think it definitely takes a willpower always to say, I need to look for help, because depending on your school, there's different programs that you can take that can provide. One of them is it NGS?
Yeah, Next Generation Scholars.
If you're going to that program, a lot of students end up going to private high schools because they find scholarships.
Right,
I think there's always different options. It's just a matter of having that willpower, looking for it, and putting the work to get into those programs. So there's definitely options nowadays that maybe back in the day there wasn't as many.
And I think those options actually, like when you mentioned back in the day, I think a lot of those resources were available, but they weren't targeted to the Latino community here. They just weren't, or we just simply didn't know, because it was harder to access information at that time.
I was gonna say connecting all the dots with parents that we had, that they didn't know so much of this education system. Even if those programs were open back then, they didn't have an understanding of like what FAFSA is, what is it what you need to get into college, how can I help my child. It was more of everything depended on us, on whether we learned how to do it, or we were just kind of like, you need this, and you're like, oh shoot, I didn't know I needed this, and I need it now. So it definitely it's a 360 moment, because there's so many pieces that connect to it. I'm gonna hand it off.
So we're actually gonna take a short break right now, and we're gonna talk a bit more about your college life and how that went. So we'll be right back. We're gonna play Sole Purpose by Evolving Wings.
Yeah. Evolving wings. Yeah. I'm a genius, original purpose, resurrect like the phoenix. From the mother lotus emerges, no longer feel wordless. To be a service to purpose, it's evolving wings por vida. Got them all like Nita, eternal play in the brain, got me insane. Explain the pain, your seat's pain. My soul wounded, some wounds can't be computed. God's great shadows meet the darkest alley. Demons came for me, but archangels parried. Swift swings to the soul is rapidly. Call it horror meets fantasy. Lower energies move like cavities. Sucker MCs, no substance. Ignore the earth's cry. Sucker MCs, no substance. Don't realize we never die. Misguided by subsidized lies. I'm guided by my ancestors' war cries. Born floor spitting truth, encouraging your spine. Evolving wings is manifesting your divine. Don't give up, fly. Compassionate can't pay my soul purpose. Wings up, wings up, wings up, wings up. Compassionate can't pay my soul purpose. Wings up, wings up, wings up, wings up. Compassionate can't pay my soul purpose. Wings up, wings up, wings up. Compassionate can't pay my soul purpose. Wings up, wings up.
Fui bendecido por los grandes que fincan cuatro paredes, no pudieron descifrar esta trivia. No compartieron visiones que nos preceden, las ansias de estar rebaten.
All right, so that was Soul Purpose by Evolving Wings. Again, you can check them out on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube Music. Which shout out to YouTube Music, bro. Like, I love using YouTube Music. Like, ever since I got like YouTube Red and stuff, like I've just been using YouTube Music, and there's a lot of like songs that you don't typically find on Spotify and stuff on YouTube. So I don't know. I just had to give a shout out to YouTube Music. Anyways, what I did want to mention too is so this not this Friday, but we have open mics here at the Multicultural Center in Marin every last Friday of the month. Our next open mic will be on August 30th, which also reminds me it's going to be a really long month again because July was a long month. I think it went till the 31st, and now it seems like August goes till the 31st as well. So look at that. So our next open mic will be on August 30th from 6 to 8 p.m. So feel free to come by if you want to share any songs, do any dance performances, anything. It's just a good place to come and meet some new creative artists or do a mock trial setting right there. So just DM us if you have any questions about open mic. And yeah, just going back into it. So how was you talked about how you applied, right, to all these different schools for law. How did you kind of come up with a list of what schools to apply to?
So for law school, it was very much based on location. I knew I wanted to practice in California, and you in order to practice in California, you do have to sit for the bar exam, and it's one of the hardest bars exams in the entire nation.
I guess let me actually ask this question first. Then, what is the bar exam?
I was
what because we kept bringing it up throughout the show, but let's just.
So the bar exam is basically a licensing exam. You can graduate law school, but you can't practice the area of law unless you pass the bar exam. And the bar exam is basically just a simulated exam that tests your knowledge about the legal field. There's about 13 areas of law that you have to know. And you study them really, really hard for 10 weeks. And then the bar exam is a 2-day exam. It's about 6 hours, but total between lunch and the time you have to check in, it's about 8 hours a day.
That's intense,
and it's back to back. It really is. And they're very strict with what you can bring in. So one day you can only bring a laptop. The other day is all Scantron. But basically the first day is written exams where out of the 15 areas of law that you've learned, they can test you on anything as small as like one rule in the entire area of the law. In an essay format, and you have an hour to answer it. It's basically like a case file. You have to issue spot. That's what we call it. Just finding the issues with what's happening with your fake case.
Yeah.
And then the second day is multiple choice, where they really do test you on like the little small intricacies of the law. So the exceptions to the exceptions to the exceptions. It's quite a beast. And anyone who goes through it, I commend them for it. Whether you pass it or not, like just sitting for the exam is so hard. I think I took it at the Oakland Convention Center, and there was, I think total 1,500 of us or like 1,300 of us all sitting in a big room typing away, and you were sitting next to someone And
what time did it start? Like 9 a.m.?
So we had to be, so the exam technically started at 9, but we as laptop users had to be seated in our seat by 8:20. But then you have all those people trying to get in through one door, so you have to prep for that time. You have to show up early. So I was waking up at 6, out the door by 7. I was in line, and I was sitting down by 8:20.
And that happened pretty recently for you, right? You took the exam,
It's always the last 2 days of July. So the 29th, the 30th, the 30th, or the 1st, like one of those dates. But they only happen twice a year, in February and July. And then you don't get your results until months after.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I hope you did great.
I hope so.
I'm crossing all my fingers right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah.
But it is the hardest, like, exam in the entire nation. And we have a passing rate of, I think, 50% right now.
Okay. I mean, that's
great.
I don't know how bad or good that is.
We do have to take into account, like in California, you do not need to go to law school to sit for that exam. Like I was saying, you can take an exam to get in there, but yeah.
So good that we clarified what
it,
is. So kind of going back to the question, how did you decide to go? Well, his question was, how did you decide to create the list, and then ultimately deciding to go where you went?
Yeah, so I basically went location-wise. I've always heard law school was going to be hard, and I knew there was going to be an amount that you have to invest money-wise.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful that my parents live in this area, so I kind of talked to them and I was like, if I move back, would you be able to help me out? And I cannot thank my sister enough. She took me in my first year. She basically paid my rent and I lived with her, and she provided me with all my meals. Like, she truly was the reason I even got through my first year.
For law school?
For law school.
Yeah.
So let's back up a second. So where did you go to do your undergrad?
Yeah.
So for my undergrad, I went to DePaul in Chicago.
Okay.
And
what made you choose that one?
They gave me the most money. That's pretty much how I knew that I couldn't pay to go to college at that time. It was going to be very much based on financial aid, because my parents didn't have the luxury of paying for my school.
Yeah.
And DePaul definitely gave me a lot of money, and they basically paid my entire way, to the point where my last year I didn't pay for anything. So they were great.
I mean, that's great, dude.
Honestly, I always say I'm a huge DePaul fan through and through. Everyone should look into it. They're very nice with scholarships. And
you went in. So sorry, I mean, this might sound a little dumb, but just for clarification. So when you applied for DePaul, you just went into majored in law, or what did you? How does that work?
So I majored in political science.
Oh, political science. Okay, so it doesn't matter. So you just have to go to an undergrad school in order to apply for law school?
Yeah, you don't have to major in a certain thing. You don't have to do a certain degree. It's just you have to get through undergrad to apply for law schools.
That was my follow-up question. What is the process like for applying for law school?
Like the prereqs, yeah.
Okay.
So
you basically have to graduate from an undergrad.
Okay. Doesn't matter the major.
Does not matter the major. There's a lot of communication. There's theater majors. The best lawyers are theater majors because they can
perform. So I should go apply for law school.
Yeah, I mean they're great. And then basically your junior, some people take gap years, and that's usually the normal way to do it, because you have to study for the LSAT, and the LSAT is an entrance exam to send in with your application, just like the ACT or the SAT.
Yeah.
The only difference with the LSAT, it's not knowledge based. It's not like based on like what you've learned throughout the years. It's based on logic, and there's logic games, logic reasoning, and reading comprehension. It's an interesting exam because it doesn't really mirror what you do in law school, but you do have to get a certain score. The higher you go, the higher kind of your options become. So everyone said you always want to aim for like 170 out of 180, like a 170 out of a 180, in order to get to the top 14 schools. So law schools are ranked, and depending on your rank, it depends like your job opportunities that opened up and what you're able to do with those law schools. So like the top 14 law schools at the time, they always said if you don't go to a top 14 law school, you're not really going to be a successful lawyer.
Interesting. Okay.
Because of the job market. So like if you go to those top 14 schools, like the job market will always
We'll
be
look
there
at
for
it
you.
and be like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And those are like the Harvards, the Yales, the Penns, like all the Ivy Leagues, like that very much was that path. So, and you also have to study for the LSAT, and that does take money because it's not something you can learn, and it's not something I would suggest just winging it, because it really is a method of learning it and sitting for it. So I happened to be in my junior year when COVID hit. So I had nothing to do for the 6 months. So I just started studying. And I think that was because they do say like take at least 6 months to study for the LSAT or like do at least 6 months worth of practice. And then after you get your score, you send that in with your GPA, your letters of recommendation, personal statement, and then some law schools require like supplemental like essays.
Okay.
But it really just
It depends on the school, really.
it really does. And it's weird because like for undergrad, you would apply with your stats and see like the acceptance rate and see like, oh, I'm most likely, like this is a safety school. For law school, there was no such thing as a safety school. What I thought was a safety school ended up waitlisting me. And I did not know that was the way it worked. And some people don't get accepted anywhere. It's because they do basically evaluate your packet as like a potential of passing the bar exam. Because at the end of the day, their rankings depend on how many people pass the bar exam, how many people get employed after they graduate. Like it's based on those rankings. And up until recently, those rankings mattered a lot. But I don't know if you saw, but Yale, Harvard, and some other schools dropped out of the rankings. They decided, we don't want to be ranked. So a lot of people went up in rankings, but that was because a lot of people dropped out of the rankings.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that matters a lot. It's like what I'm learning is that just so many small things add up a lot. Like these small things add up a lot. You know what I mean? So ultimately, you ended up going to Santa Clara, right? Mm-hmm. And how? Yeah. I mean, what made you stick to that?
So Santa Clara, I knew I wanted to do something in tech because I had done my internship with criminal law. I realized that it was too emotional for me, and I would take my work home. Same thing with immigration. Like every time I would see a client, it was like I was seeing my dad or like my uncles, and that I could never leave that just at work. I would have to take it home.
Right.
So I had to sit down with myself and be like, okay, what type of law do you see yourself practicing where you're as passionate, but can also like have a life outside of it? So I was looking into tech, a lot of corporate, and then Santa Clara came around. I knew of Santa Clara. Everyone always said, Santa Clara is such a good school. So I applied. Truthfully, I didn't think I was going to get in. I did not think. I was very much committed to going to a different school. And I out of a whim, applied to one in Seattle just because. And I ended up, I was choosing between Santa Clara and the school in Seattle for some weird reason. But Santa Clara ended up being the place, like the stats wise, at least for me, I wanted to see how many people were employed, the network that they bring. Like you have to start evaluating the school as a whole. I was also accepted to another law school, but they didn't have the stats that I wanted. And that just ended up being my decision.
Well, yeah, it's a factor, and it's a big decision. You know?
It's a big commitment, and I wouldn't take it lightly. I would really do a pros and cons list because that's what I did. But I knew that I wanted to practice and be back home and at least close enough to my mom and dad so that when I did need to go cry, I'd be like, coming home.
Did you go to a Niners game?
I did. It was very
Only time
fun.
I've ever been to Santa Clara is for Levi Stadium.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Like Santa Clara does some great like events. Like they take us to go tour the Niners. They have a Warriors tour. So they have a lot of connections in the Silicon Valley that I think I looked into. Like they're the heart of the Silicon Valley, and their connections are so strong. And to this day, every alum that I've talked to is so willing to sit down with you and talk to you about anything and answer any questions. And I think
cool.
That's really good to do your homework when choosing a school that you're going to be there for a while.
Yeah.
What is the class structure like? Is it different from your
traditional school
going? What's it like? Do you guys do quarterly, semester?
Yeah, great.
So,
or what does it look like?
Law school is all semester.
Okay.
It's semester based. There is
not
a
like
couple
fancy UCs with their quarter system.
No, but I was in quarter system in undergrad and I loved it. I loved getting rid of the classes so fast.
And all the friends that I had that were in the quarter system hated it. So I don't know.
It does go by fast, so if you can't keep up, it's hard.
Okay, yeah.
But law school is semesters. There are a couple classes that do take up the 2 years, but the way you go into your cohort. So it's pretty much you get put into a section, and that is your section for your entire first year. So you are with the same 70 students every single day, same schedule, same everything is uniformed.
Interesting. Okay.
I had my section, and there was in my year there was 6 sections, and I was in one of them. So I didn't get to see, and we were all on opposite schedules. So I didn't get to see people who were in different sections as much as I saw my section. So you pretty much have a class of 70. And unlike undergrad, you would go to lectures and learn lectures. I think in law school, lectures are supplemental. A lot of the learning gets done with reading. And they do say, law school, we read pages and pages and pages of cases, and that was basically where our knowledge came from. And on top of that, you also have to look for supplemental different books that would explain the law in a different way where your brain will comprehend it. So the lectures were very much supplemental, and they also do the Socratic method where you basically have to be prepared for class, and a professor can just call out your name, and you have to be ready to discuss what he is asking. And a lot of them are cases, so you have to do all the reading. So in case you do get called, you have to be able to state the facts, state the issue, state the rule, and what the court said, and why you what your thoughts on. So it's a little daunting.
Did they ever call on you?
Oh yeah.
How was that? What was your emotions going?
Well, the first time around, so there was one professor who used a microphone.
Oh.
Yeah, and he was not truly Socratic method where he would just call out your name, but you would get the microphone, you knew you were on call.
It's kind of like popcorn reading, but more intense.
Popcorn reading, way more intense.
Yeah.
The good thing about my name is because most of my professors didn't know how to say it, I think they didn't want to call on me. So I got away with not being called as much. But there was the one time when I think I was just dozed off. I definitely did not have sleep that day. I was just dozing off, not paying attention, and all I hear is my name. And I kid you not, I went blank in the face. I had not heard what he was saying beforehand, and I just stared at him, and I was hoping for someone to just whisper something to me so I knew what to say, and then I blacked out because I don't remember anything. I don't the anxiety of just being the only person in a room of 70 speaking was so frightening that I just don't remember it.
But that's kind of how it is in a real court case, though, right? Because as most of the time, it's the lawyer, the judge.
In hindsight, yes.
Yeah. So it kind of helps you prepare for that. But at the same time, it's a little, I know it's daunting. It's daunting to be like that, especially when everyone else is kind of on top of it and stuff. You know what I mean? You don't want to look like you're falling behind, right?
Yeah.
So it's yeah, I mean, I feel it. I understand.
I feel like we're going by so fast with these questions because we're running out of time. But I do want to ask a little bit more of so now you're waiting for your bar exam results. What does life look like after law school?
Yeah, and the bar exam.
Yeah, before that, how long is law school though?
Law school is 3 years.
3 years? Okay.
So total 7 years, including undergrad.
Okay. So then now you did that. How did you feel after, and then what's it life like now?
I think after, you just don't know. You never feel like you ace the bar exam. And if you do, I don't know how much studying you did.
You're a robot.
Yeah, because
you're a complete robot.
You're just never
you could do that.
fully prepared for the bar exam. So coming out of it, I was just relieved, and I was just... I'm very religious in the sense of let go and let God. So it's I did what I had to do. I put in the work, and then now it's just up to whatever
up to faith.
Yeah, up to faith, and what it is what it's going to be. So post that, I do have a job lined up as a post law clerk, or post bar law clerk. where I am basically doing attorney work under the supervision of an attorney, but I can't sign any legal documents. I'm still supervised. It's very much paralegal work, but I'm still employed. So I'm starting that. And then basically as soon as the bar results come out, I will either be graduated into being an attorney at the firm or continue on, hopefully.
And doing your own private practice at some point?
As much as I would love to follow into my entrepreneur's mom's footsteps, I don't know if that's going to be my path for me.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot that goes into running a law firm.
Right.
There are such things as being partners at a firm where it's like you are co-owning but not fully owning.
Yeah, I think I see a lot more of those. Like a lot more of like partner law firms.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think I've had a path for so long that I think because my path was law school and bar exam, I'm sitting in a point where I don't know what's next. And that's okay. It's going to figure itself out, but I don't know what's next. But I'm just going to take everything as it comes and enjoy every moment of it because I did what a lot of people wouldn't have imagined that I could have achieved when I came to the United States.
Go ahead.
I was gonna. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of the things that you've been sharing. I'm understanding a little bit more about law school and all of that. I did want to go back to something maybe we skipped on, and is law school very expensive?
Yes.
I would assume so.
Yes, if you Google the average
tuition.
No, if you Google the average loan amount that each law student takes, it's about $200,000.
Do you
per
get
semester?
Scholarship for per semester or in total?
Total for the 3 years.
Okay, that's still. I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's
a lot.
It's a lot. I mean, yeah.
Are scholarships available for that as well within this law school, or how does that work?
There is, but there's not need based. So that's the difference. It's based on academics. So that's why the LSAT matters so much, and that's why people take gap years to really perfect their LSAT score so that they can get higher scholarships, because the LSAT score does open up a lot more, like a bigger pool of money. Santa Clara is very generous with their loan or with their scholarships. So it really does depend on the school. I know there's a couple schools that give full rides. It really just comes down to what you offer in your application. That's why your application matters so much when you submit it, and you don't want to submit it unless you're 100% content that you can't do any better. That's why your GPA matters, your LSAT matters, and all of that. So yeah, but majority of the people do pay off law school with their loans, unless, they have the privilege of being able to fund it elsewhere.
And now, just kind of also another clarifying question. So what law did you end up majoring in then? Like what?
So there's no majoring. But
See that I guess that's the question.
Practice?
Yeah, what would you like to practice?
So I'm doing civil litigation.
What is that?
Civil litigation it's all civil law, not criminal. So anything that has to do from people to people, like I can sue you for employment reasons, or you trespass on my land. So it's more person to person. Criminal's more, state to person.
Like working with like felonies, cases. And that kind of
so
stuff.
civil is just anything under not criminal.
Okay.
And then you could specialize in like family law, but I'm doing civil litigation. Litigation are the people that you see in the courtroom.
Yeah.
There's transactional attorneys that they are the ones drafting the contracts. They say like transactional attorneys are the ones you see before an issue happens. Litigators are when the issue is happening and you need someone to advocate for you in the courthouse.
Cool. Well, we're really close to ending the show here. And I've just been learning so much throughout this entire show. And I just wanted to ask you, Gueverly, is there any last kind of like words of advice that you have for anyone in our audience who might be wanting to look into law school, or, anything you'd like our audience to take away from our conversation?
I mean, definitely if you're even a bit interested, scratch that itch. I always say, like, figure out what it is about it that you are so passionate about. And I'm always here. Like, I obviously don't know every single person who listens to this radio, but I will always be an open door for anyone that wants to learn about the legal field. And I want to be as transparent about the process as I possibly can and give them, advice along the way, because I wouldn't be here without the mentors that I had in my life. So I could only hope to give back and be that mentor for someone in the long run.
Awesome. I think this is your start.
Yeah.
Regardless, because I would have thought you went into immigration law, but you didn't, which it doesn't really matter. I think your story of how you decided to, become, you said you can't call yourself a lawyer, but becoming a lawyer, I think is powerful. So for all of you out there, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, totally. And I've learned so much. And yeah, man, I just got to give you a shout out because class of 2017, shout out to everyone and shout out to you representing us and really doing big things. And I'm really excited to see how your future goes from here. Yeah. And it's really, really been awesome to be able to reconnect with you and just learn more about your background. And it's amazing. What you're doing is awesome. So yeah, so best of luck with everything else.
You.
And that has been Tay Radio Marin, everyone. So we will catch you guys next week.